What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. Today's video is one which I'm sure won't be controversial whatsoever. Will Blizzard remove heroes in Overwatch 2? I'm not talking about reworking, reclassifying, or otherwise tweaking the existing Overwatch heroes come the sequel. I mean straight up Thanos snapping them out of the roster. Just poof, gone. They're no longer a hero. Now, I think I can safely guess what most people's thoughts on this would end up being, but there are some important aspects to consider when it comes to not just will Blizzard remove some of the current heroes in Overwatch 2, but should they remove them? And unfortunately, it's not as clean-cut and simple as you might think. Real quick though, before I get on into it, I'd like to remind you to subscribe and hit up that bell icon so you never miss out on any future Overwatch and Overwatch 2 news and content. But now, let's have a civil discussion about whether or not Blizzard will, or should, remove heroes in Overwatch's sequel. Now, right off the bat, I'm sure several of you have already scurried down to the comment sections to type, "But Master Ian Gamer, there was already an interview where Jeff Kaplan said that no heroes would be removed from Overwatch 2. And you're right, there was an interview where Jeff Kaplan said that. But you know what else? Jeff Kaplan ain't the director of Overwatch 2 no more. Just because a few months ago he said that Blizzard wouldn't be removing any of the existing heroes once the sequel comes around, doesn't mean that the new leadership at Blizzard will maintain that same mentality. A lot of things can change over the course of a game's development, and especially when you look at change in leadership like this, I'm sure removing heroes is something that's certainly not off the table in terms of Overwatch 2. However, that being said, I don't think Blizzard will remove heroes, or at the very least, they certainly won't want to, because, as I'm sure you could already assume, that will go over terribly in the community. Overwatch is a game built from the ground up with the idea of having these relatable, lovable characters who are playable as heroes in-game. People very easily attach themselves to any number of these different characters, and so, naturally, the thought of one day never again being able to play that character you love so much, well, that could lead to some high emotions, let's just say. And considering the track record so far when it comes to Overwatch 2 and how it's been received by the Overwatch community and the gaming sphere overall, yeah, I really don't think Blizzard could afford to take that sort of PR hit. So, with that being said, video over. Blizzard probably won't do it because it'll be a bad decision from a community's perspective, and thus nothing else to talk about, right? Well, sure, Blizzard probably won't remove heroes, but I think it's worth having a discussion on top of that and asking, should Blizzard remove heroes? When asking this question, there's a few fronts that you can take in discussing it. Perhaps the first one which would come to mind is the idea of all these annoying and unbalanced heroes that you constantly see people complaining about on the Overwatch forums. Oh, delete Brigitte, delete Mercy, delete basically anyone for the most part. Players wanting a specific hero to be removed because they personally find that character annoying or unfun or stupid, I guess. I don't know. There are a lot of reasons you don't like a character, I guess. Personally, though, I wouldn't consider that a very justified reason to flat out delete a character. There's a lot of things which can be done to tweak annoying heroes in order to make them less annoying. So yes, perhaps the simplest solution would be to just cut a hero out entirely, but I'm not really a fan of that because, well, as I said before, people get attached to heroes, and thus I think removing heroes should be an absolute last resort sort of solution. I'm skeptical that Blizzard would ever, even in Overwatch 2, delete an existing hero just because people don't enjoy them or find them obnoxious, but I could potentially see things going that far if, with the transition from Overwatch to Overwatch 2, that given hero no longer fits within the game's environment. We know that Overwatch 2 is going to be changing drastically from what we have currently in the first Overwatch game, most notably when it comes to team sizes being reduced from 6v6 to 5v5, in addition to a number of individual hero balance changes which are a result of that. Tank heroes in particular seem to be undergoing very extreme changes in many situations, from gaining new abilities to potentially losing abilities, and just having their overall mechanics shifted around in order to work in a team comp where they're the only tank. On top of that, with there only being one tank hero, that then waterfalls down to other characters in the DPS and support categories having to be tweaked as well in order to accommodate that change. So the big question that all boils down to then is, what do you do with these older heroes who simply can't be adequately tweaked to fit this new system? As is, many of the more general tank heroes like Reinhardt and Zarya already feel sort of clunky with the changes Blizzard has shown off for their new Overwatch 2 versions. Reinhardt having 2 fire strikes, the merging of Zarya's bubbles into just one shared pool. And while the Reinhardt and Zarya examples I think probably work out just fine, the main issue I see is when it comes to heroes like Orisa and Sigma. These are much more specialist type tank heroes who are a bit more niche in how they function, and so I wonder just how much do these two heroes need to change in order to work in the new Overwatch 2 system? Will they have to get completely brand new abilities? Will their entire kits be reworked from the ground up? If that ends up being the case, then that also leads to the question of whether or not it's worthwhile to preserve anything from the original hero. I think one of the areas that ends up being the biggest issue for this sort of thing is the visual design of the characters and how the visuals of every individual hero in Overwatch informs that hero's kit, role, and abilities. Orisa is this big, tanky, quadrupedal robot. She's an anchor for her team and is seen as a stronghold which players can rally around for protection. Likewise, Sigma is this chaotic, levitating tank hero who has what at a first appears to be a sort of random mishmash of gravity-themed abilities that in actuality function together in a strange sort of rhythm to make him useful at his job. If Blizzard ended up forcing either of these characters to end up filling a different sort of role, not that they would necessarily leave the tank role, but perhaps serve different functions within the tank role, then more than likely their identities would end up conflicting with whatever their final kit in Overwatch 2 ends up being. Not to mention other little restrictions that come about when focusing specifically on a hero's visual design. Part of Sigma's kit is having the 2 floating hyperspheres, which he uses as his primary fire. And while there are certainly a few things they could do to tweak these abilities, such as perhaps removing the bounce aspect of them or adjusting the fire rate or damage dealt, at the end of the day, he will always be stuck having a primary fire that consists of these 2 hyperspheres, because that is a core part of his visual design, and we can clearly see them present in the majority of visuals representing him as a character. They couldn't just give him a new primary fire that's like a shotgun or some kind of gravity hammer, because those aren't visually and physically parts of his existing kit. They would have to completely redesign his existing models in-game in order to accommodate for any significant changes like that, which would then force them to go back and update all of his existing in-game cosmetics, as well as any official branding, artwork, merchandise, and other stuff they've made featuring Sigma. Because of this, the options Blizzard has when it comes to reworking and tweaking Sigma to better fit in the new Overwatch 2 system are drastically limited. There's only so many things they can tweak and change about the hero before they'd end up breaking the character's established visual design, and thus have to A, build an entire new model for the character, and B, result in the character essentially just being a brand new hero. Which really gets down to the crux of my point, which is, at what point would it be easier to delete Sigma and build a brand new character from scratch in his place, as opposed to reworking the character we already have? Now, you might say that we could just take the best of both worlds. We rework Sigma as best we can while sticking to his visual and character design, and then just add a new tank on top of that, because hey, more heroes are pretty much always better, right? Well, you're still stuck with the issue of the fact that Sigma, no matter what, might not end up fitting in Overwatch 2. Ideally, yes, Blizzard would be able to rework him as a hero that maintains his visual and character design and the core themes of his kit, while still being a balanced and viable hero in Overwatch 2, but what if that's simply not possible? As I mentioned before, a lot of the heroes are going to be reworked or tweaked to the point that you could almost consider them to be new heroes. But then what happens with these certain instances where a specific hero just can't be adequately reworked into something that works in the sequel? Are you just doomed to leave them as a hero that Blizzard would inevitably have to nerf to the point that they're not viable because then they'd be broken, and thus they're just this sort of throw pick that you can play in arcade if you want, but otherwise there's no viable use in a competitive match? Or maybe it ends up being that Blizzard can adapt these older heroes to work in Overwatch 2, but the amount of time and effort it takes to achieve that will result in either delaying the entire game outright or preventing them from creating new features and content for the game that they otherwise would have been able to put in. At that point, would it not be better for Blizzard to just polish and refine the game by just cutting them from the roster entirely? Personally, I believe that if Blizzard wants to make Overwatch 2 as balanced and polished and well-refined as possible, they have to, at the very least, be open to removing heroes who were in Overwatch 1. Will they end up doing that? I doubt it. I really don't think Blizzard would take the risk of upsetting the community by removing heroes who exist already. But the sad thing about that is I can't help but imagine that we're inevitably going to get an inferior final product because of that. And I'm saying that as someone who personally doesn't want any of the heroes to be removed. And for the record, I personally love Sigma. I would be gutted if Blizzard ended up cutting him from the game. I only used him as an example earlier in this video because he's certainly one of the heroes who I'd say is most at risk of suffering that sort of fate, but I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. I am 100% on board with Sigma remaining in Overwatch. But from an unbiased perspective, focusing simply on Overwatch's balance and polish and game design perspective, I think Blizzard should be open to removing heroes. I honestly think one of the biggest issues Overwatch 2 has at this point in development is that it's trying too hard to justify its existence as a true sequel while still retaining as much as possible from the original. And of course, ideally, they'd be able to preserve everything great from the original while adding new and improved things in the sequel version. But honestly, more often than not, when you're designing a video game sequel, you're going to have to cut some things that were in the original. Especially when you're looking at a game with as many fundamental changes as Overwatch 2, and it's changed from 6v6 to 5v5, on top of all the other things they're going to be introducing. Despite my love for essentially every single character on the existing Overwatch roster, I also don't want the preservation of those characters to hinder what Overwatch 2 ultimately ends up being. I don't want it to feel like this clunky mishmash of old characters and abilities that have just been latched onto and Blizzard is refusing to let go of simply because of how the community will feel about them. And this is especially so if Blizzard holding on to all these older characters results in Overwatch 2 feeling unpolished and unrefined. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge fan of the changes we've seen so far to heroes like Reinhardt and Zarya, in that many of the changes we've seen for them in Overwatch 2 kinda just feel like patchwork to make these older heroes work in the new system. And while Blizzard can certainly get away with doing that for a number of heroes, it seems almost inevitable to me that at least some of the heroes on the existing roster won't be able to get by so easily. So I guess the big question I have for you all now to end out this video is, do you think the preservation of every individual character from the Overwatch 1 roster is worth the inevitable clunkiness and lack of polish it'll end up creating in Overwatch 2? Would you rather Blizzard remove certain old heroes in favor of making the game feel more complete, fresh, and new? Or perhaps above everything else, you're more concerned with just being able to see the hero you already love playable in the sequel? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'm sure there will only be nice, civil comments having a pleasant discussion of this video's topic, and there certainly will be no knee-jerk toxicity raging about the idea of their favorite hero being removed. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to never miss out on any future Overwatch and Overwatch 2 news and content. And special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible. If you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.